Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Spook Manor. Are you here for a haunting tale through Arkansas's historic past? Then join me as we follow a Miss Beatrice Rodgers as she comes face to face with the unexplained. It is a warm summer's day in Little Rock where our story begins. Beautiful people are rushing about in their formal attire as they prepare for a glamorous wedding set in the exquisite garden of Curran Hall. It is a glorious antebellum home with a history that dates back to the mid-1800s. This classic Greek Revival structure, now the mayor's reception hall and visitors information center, was saved from demolition in 1996 by the city and the Little Rock Advertising and Promotion Commission. The Little Rock Visitor Information Center Foundation took on the renovations, and after $1.4 million were spent and 6 years of restoration had completed, the home finally reopened to the public in 2002. Today, in all its glory, the Visitor Center, which currently rents out space for special events, is adorned with historic furnishings, period paintings, and offers exhibits of artifacts owned by early inhabitants of the house. The sun is shining brightly upon the lush Marjoram Ward Jackson garden. The vibrant flowers artfully dance in the gentle breeze as Miss Beatrice Rodgers stands in a stuffy business suit. She is making note to compliment the exceptional work done by the Pulaski County master gardeners who maintain the property. They showed great professionalism and tasteful skill in hiding her company's surveillance equipment among the rich foliage. She carefully wipes a bead of sweat from her brow, which is pulled back and held tight by her simple yet conservative bun. She is a large woman, standing just over 6 feet tall, and with a masculine bone structure. The sight of her is quite intimidating, to say the least. Her fierce eyes cut like knives when you make contact, and she is responsible for making sure all is in perfect order. This place is a testament to history and time, with tales that date back to the Civil War. But Miss Beatrice doesn't care about all of that. She was hired to find problems, and problems were her sole focus. Not long after her security company had installed their highest quality system available about 3.5 months ago, there had been reports of strange things happening. The company's alarms began to go off at odd hours, and for apparently no reason at all. Motion cameras would detect movement, flicker, or shut off completely. Objects in rooms would disappear, only to show up on CCTV footage hours later in other rooms with no explanation. It is Miss Beatrice's job to discover what this was all about. Several representatives from her company had already come out at 4 different times to investigate their system's false reporting, but to no avail. They had checked wiring, Wi-Fi, and even went to the extent of providing all new equipment. Yet still, these false alarms kept coming in. Dressed for success and intimidation, while also respecting the guests of the establishment, Beatrice walked about the celebration, quietly imposing a watchful eye on every employee of Curran Hall. She asked pointed and personal questions behind closed doors, and made note of everyone she deemed suspicious. The staff walked about with nervous professionalism as the festivities continued. They did their job well. Professional being the key word here, as the wedding party never seemed to notice the interrogation. As evening rolled around, and the wedding came slowly to an end, the employees went about their duties to securely close down the building for the night. Miss Beatrice made note of all who stayed after closing, and stood with accusing eyes as she watched each person leave one by one. Finally, she stood alone in the parking lot with the young manager's assistant, Ella. Ella is a pretty young woman in her early 20s. She had been working at Curran Hall for several years now, and being a history major, she knows all the stories behind this place better than anyone else who worked there. Being their most trusted employee, Ella was asked to help Miss Beatrice in her efforts, and she was more than happy to comply. She handed over a set of keys the manager had left, and smiled as she stated, "This gorgeous place is so serene during the day. It brings happiness to so many people, but it can get a little bit spooky at night," she added with a wink. Miss Beatrice glared at the girl, who quickly added a warm, "Have a good night," before turning her back and making her way across the parking area to her car. She stopped at the driver's door and hollered out to Beatrice, "I'm going to be pulling an all-nighter. I'm studying for a test, so if you need me for anything, please don't hesitate to text." Miss Beatrice was disgruntled by this. With no other answers to be found throughout the day, she decided that the only way she would find the culprit was simply to stay the night by herself. No one was supposed to know this except Ella and her manager, and she certainly didn't appreciate the loud announcement across the parking lot. She had no fear of what teenage hooligans she might face. She had a reputation for being a tough old brute with a hard demeanor and heart of stone. Her colleagues would often whisper behind her back, "That woman could scare the devil back to hell." And that is exactly the way she wanted to be perceived. Upon locking the door behind her, she made her way around the home in search of potential flaws in security. She left all of the lights off and had a large flashlight in hand. With her phone camera at the ready, she fully planned to catch whoever is causing the mischief in the act. The hours ticked by as she walked about in the darkness. Her eyes scaled the artifacts and antiques that graced each elegant room. It was then that the clock in the distance broke the night silence and echoed throughout the structure. It is midnight. The witching hour had arrived. She thought she had seen a ball of light through a doorway out of the corner of her eye. A flashlight, perhaps? Was this the troublemaker she had been searching for? Slowly she made her way towards it, and followed it down the long hallway that elegantly reflected the towering ceilings and antebellum charm of the structure. It seemed to go from room to room, always just out of sight. She then noticed a woman sitting in one of the rocking chairs who appeared to be pregnant. The closer she got to the dark figure, the more detail she could see. It was apparent the woman was adorned in period clothing from the 1800s. Quickly, Miss Beatrice dashed over to the doorway and threw it open with a loud "Gotcha!" But then she was taken aback. The pregnant woman appears to have completely vanished, leaving nothing but an empty chair, rocking by itself in the stillness of the night as it overlooked the garden. Miss Beatrice shook her head and immediately texted Ella, "I need the names of all of your reenactment employees." Ella quickly responded, "We don't do reenactments at this time. Why do you ask?" Miss Beatrice replied with a description of the woman and was enraged to see Ella's reply. "Sounds like Mary Starbuck Walters. Her husband, Colonel Ebenezer Walters, built the home for her as a wedding gift in 1842, but she died in childbirth before the place was finished a year later, and he ended up selling it in 1849 to a prominent lawyer named James Moore Curran. This is where Curran Hall got its name." Quickly, Miss Beatrice texted back in a huff, "And what does that have to do with the price of beans?" She thought to herself, surely this foolish girl was not implying she had just seen a ghost. Despite her outrage, a sudden chill ran down her spine as she noticed a subtle sound of a dinner party in another part of the house. The clanking dishes, gentle laughter, and happy conversation seemed to echo throughout the walls. The air became abnormally stuffy, as though there was no air conditioning as she made her way towards the large dining hall. She walked slowly, filming with her phone as she went. Quietly, she approached the entryway to the dining room and could see soft candlelight flickering as though it was on a table inside. In the muffled conversation, she heard a woman laugh. "Didn't you hear? Sophia married his law partner after he died." Quickly, Beatrice let herself be known to the group and jumped into the entryway with the intent to surprise the unwelcome guests. But no one was there. There was nothing but a dark room. No candlelight or happy patrons. The air had cleared, and she again stood alone in the darkness, baffled. "I just need some coffee. I'm too tired, that's all," she thought to herself, trying not to question her own sanity. Sweating profusely from the excitement and stress, she made her way into the kitchen. As she went through the doors, the warm aroma of delicious coffee filled her senses. Turning on the light, she discovered a freshly brewing pot was almost ready for her. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Someone had to be here with her. Coffee doesn't make itself, and the unit sits here unplugged as added evidence. She instantly felt confident. Someone was messing with her. This must be some sort of a prank. Quickly, she texted Ella again. "Who is Sophia and the man she ran off with?" Instantly, she got a response. "So glad you're enjoying the history of the place. Sophia Fulton was married to that lawyer, James Curran, I had mentioned earlier. She was the daughter of William Savin Fulton, who was the last territorial governor of Arkansas and also the first state senator. When her husband died suddenly, she married his law partner and they left before the beginning of the Civil War. Suddenly, a man's voice cried out from the other room. "Jacob, they're after you! You've been accused of killing Parker!" And Miss Beatrice went after the voice without thinking or taking time to respond to Ella. Running through the corridor, Beatrice heard the sound of another man hollering in response. "Stop, you fool! The place is booby-trapped!" And then a loud crash came from what was once the old parlor room. Throwing open the door, she again found herself in a space empty of people. Yet a large painting appeared to have been moved across the room and onto the floor, though luckily it was free of damage. Miss Beatrice started to panic. What was going on here? She had never believed in the supernatural before, yet there appeared to be no other explanation. With a racing heart and short of breath from the intense fear, Miss Beatrice sent her last text to Ella that night. "There are people here. One named Jacob. I don't know the name of the other man, but he is accusing Jacob of killing some man named Parker." There was a long pause as she stared at her phone, waiting for a response. She could hear the thumping of her heart as she waited in anticipation. Finally, the message bubble popped up. Ella was typing for what seemed a rather long time. Jacob Frolich bought Curran Hall at the end of the Civil War. He was a Confederate soldier and a known member of the Klan. He was elected for 3 consecutive terms as Arkansas's post-Reconstruction Secretary of State from 1879 to 1885. Frolich was under heavy surveillance by the government for his political views, and it is rumored that he booby-trapped the House as a result. He was accused of killing a man named Albert Parker, who was an agent for the Reconstruction government known for his anti-slavery views. Frolich fled to Canada to avoid being arrested, but returned after the Reconstruction government collapsed. He was then acquitted of all charges. Beatrice stared in shock at the message. Everything she had seen on this terrifying summer's night reflected the undeniable history of this extravagant home. Could it be, she thought to herself, that I am a witness to the paranormal? Are haunted houses truly real? But as another text came in from Ella, Beatrice got her answer. Frolich sold the place to Mary Eliza Bell, the daughter of William E. Woodruff, in 1881. Her brother, Alden Woodruff, moved into the home after his house caught fire and often claimed that the place is haunted, stating that he had seen the ghosts, especially that of Mary Walters, often within the home throughout the time he had lived there. But never fear, the ghosts are completely harmless. Other than some slight annoyances and minor poltergeist activity, no one has ever been hurt by the spirits at Curran Hall. If anything, the specters seem to enjoy the festivities of the living and have been known to bring good fortune to people who book events here. Beatrice's hands were shaking as she read the last line, and the terrifying reality kept her frozen in place. But when she felt someone's breath on the back of her neck, she slowly looked up and found herself face to face with the ghostly form of the pregnant woman she had seen earlier. The transparent spirit smiled softly and said, "Yes, I'm Mary." It was then that Miss Beatrice fled the home without stopping to lock the doors or secure the premises. The next day, her company had dropped the Visitor Information Center from their client list, and coworkers were forced within the security company to never mention the historic place in her presence again. Miss Beatrice was never the same after that night. People tend to deal with the paranormal differently. While many find fear and terror in the idea of a ghostly encounter, others, like young Ella, and many of the proud staff members who enjoy the kindly spirits, find peace in the concept of the afterlife. To preserve history is to shine a light upon the past in hopes of creating a better world for future generations. To those who are lucky enough to experience this location firsthand, they reach a place of sanctity and serenity that can only be found at Curran Hall. So tell me, my loves, have you been to this spectacular location? Do you wish to book an event where ghosts can mingle with your living guests? Please check for a link in the description down below and like and subscribe for more fictional stories that are often of actual urban legends and sometimes have historical reference. See you next week and have a good night.